My name is Magdalena Perez. My research topic is life without parole a fair sentence for all juveniles? The United States leads the world in incarcerating juveniles. Youth facing criminal offenses need to be evaluated differently from adults in our court system, and the appropriate laws should treat them accordingly. Parole should be given to all juveniles who are serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. Research studies show evidence that youth are cognitively, behaviorally, and emotionally different than adults. There are some famous U.S. Supreme Court cases, just to name a few. Graham versus Florida, Miller versus Alabama, and Jackson versus Hobbs. These are cases about juveniles who are serving life sentences without the possibility of parole that challenged the 8th Amendment clause of the cruel and unusual punishment of the Constitution. The court reasoned that life without parole is unconstitutional for non-homicide crimes. There are political and policy implications that surrounds this controversial issue. Juveniles are not allowed to consume alcohol or tobacco until the legal age. They cannot vote until the age 18. Also, they are not allowed to work until they reach the appropriate age because of the labor laws. When a juvenile commits a capital crime, their case is automatically taken to adult court. There are political and policy implications that are still surrounding this issue. There are arguments about life without parole to be unconstitutional for juveniles. According to the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, it should be taken into account about the clause. There is a case of a young man named Adolfo Davis, who was 14 years old at that time when he was convicted of accomplice to homicide, and he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I also read about a young woman, Sarah Krusman. At age 16, she shot and killed someone because she was sexually and physically abused. Now, she is 32 years old. This story reminds me that a person still needs to be punished, but their backgrounds and home life should be looked into. These are some of the stories, real stories, of many that fall under the 8th Amendment clause of the Constitution. The court was considering only the question of children convicted of non-homicide offenses. The court's reasoning could be in large transferred to other lethal consequences committed by children. Another implication that came up in my finding was the racial disparity. 41,095 people serving life sentences in 2008. 48.3% were African American who committed a homicide crime on a white person. Of that 48.3%, there was 23.3% that were African American juveniles that were arrested for homicide on a white person. Now let's look into the brain and psychology of juveniles. There is research evidence that a juvenile's brain is not fully developed until their early 20s. They also have greater levels of impulsivity and lack abilities of long-term consequences. For the history of juvenile justice, way back in the 19th century, juveniles were punished as adults. These juveniles were confined with adult criminals and with the mentally ill in overcrowded institutions. The House of Refuge was the first institution, or we can say house, to confine juveniles. That house was located in New York City. There are current juvenile programs that are offered for juveniles, which are juvenile boot camps, drug treatment programs, probation and parole, aftercare programs, residential and non-residential community treatment programs. Some of the rehabilitation programs that are offered in institutions are educational programs, social interaction skills programs, and religious programs. But some of these rehabilitation programs are not offered in institutions. Not all of them do. And some of the prisoners have to qualify for these programs. Does rehabilitation work? In my findings, I found that research evidence that rehabilitation does work. Rehabilitation is the most effective tool for preventing recidivism. It is expensive and time-consuming, but is worthwhile. There are two factors that work against rehabilitation. One, it has been controlled by politicians that they want immediate results, and society adapted to quick-minute solutions. Two, politicians see the prison system as a profitable business, which means that rehabilitation is the last thing on their list. In conclusion, I have concluded that the U.S. leads the world in doling out the harshest sentences for juveniles. All juveniles should qualify for all these rehabilitation programs. Juveniles are not fully mentally developed until in their early 20s. Recidivism rates are lower when participation of rehabilitation programs are outside prison walls. The courts have the ability to reverse life without parole sentences for many juveniles. This can change the life of juveniles. I do not call for the elimination of juvenile life without parole sentences for the guaranteed release of these offenders. I rather propose that an opportunity for review be granted after a reasonable period of incarceration. I was able to learn of the implications that surround this controversial issue, in which one of them that I have mentioned before was the racial disparity that exists in the criminal justice system. I found that life without parole can stunt a young person's biological and social development, which will make it harder for them to be productive adults. I believe that rehabilitation is possible inside the correctional system as well as outside prison walls. Juveniles deserve a chance to have parole, a chance to become law-abiding citizens. They are children. I hope that you find this presentation very informational. And I thank you again for watching this video